Number 1. The Prince Rupert's Drop. Imagine you travel back to London in the year 1660. You walk into the court of King Charles II and hand him a small, tadpole-shaped piece of glass. It looks innocent, like a frozen teardrop. You tell the king to smash it. He takes a hammer and brings it down with full force on the thick end of the glass. The hammer dents. The glass, it remains perfect. You could shoot a bullet at this thing, and the bullet would shatter before the glass does. But this invincibility is a trick. This object is actually a frozen explosion. Because the glass was cooled instantly in water, the outside is compressing the inside with massive force. It is holding itself together with tension so high, it defies logic. Here is the twist. If you take a pair of pliers and gently snip the thin, fragile tail of the drop, just a tiny scratch, the entire object instantly vaporizes. The release of tension travels at Mach 5, exploding the glass into dust faster than a speeding bullet. It teaches us a strange lesson about strength. Sometimes the things that look the toughest on the outside are actually holding onto the most stress on the inside. And one small crack is all it takes to shatter them. Number 2. The Antikythera Mechanism. Sometimes the impossible isn't about physics, it's about time. In 1901, sponge divers off the coast of Greece found shipwreck. Among the gold and statues, they found a corroded, green lump of bronze. It looked like trash. For decades, it sat in a museum, ignored. It was just a rock. But in the 1970s and early 2000s, scientists decided to scan it with X-rays. What they saw inside terrified historians. Inside this ancient rock were 30 distinct, interlocking bronze gears. It wasn't a sculpture. It was an analog computer designed to predict eclipses and track the movement of the planets with perfect mathematical precision. The problem: this device dates back to around 100 BC. Technology this complex didn't appear again in Europe until the mechanical clocks of the 14th century. That is a 1,500-year gap. It's like opening a tomb in ancient Egypt and finding a jet engine inside. This object proves that human progress isn't a straight line. We can invent miracles, and then, just as easily, we can forget them. Number 3. Sugihara's ambiguous cylinders. If the first two objects broke the rules of physics and history, this next one breaks your brain. In 2016, a Japanese mathematician named Kokichi Sugihara placed a simple plastic square on a table. It looks like a standard four-sided tube. Nothing special. Then he places a mirror behind it. In the reflection, the square is clearly, undeniably, a circle. You blink. You look back at the object, square. You look at the mirror, circle. It feels like a glitch in the simulation. And just when you think you figured it out, he rotates the object. Now, the real object looks like a circle, and the reflection looks like a square. There is no CGI here. This is called anomalous mirror symmetry. The object has a wavy, distorted top edge that isn't flat. But your brain is lazy. It sees the wavy lines and thinks, that's too complicated, let's just autofill it as a square. Your brain prefers a simple lie to a complex truth. It forces you to ask, if your eyes can be hacked this easily by a piece of plastic, how much of the world around you is real, and how much is just your brain guessing? Number 4. Starlite. In 1990, a man named Maurice Ward walked onto a BBC television stage. He wasn't a scientist, he was a hairdresser from Yorkshire. He was holding an egg coated in a thin layer of white paste he had mixed in his kitchen blender. On live TV, he held a blowtorch directly to the egg for several minutes. The flame was hot enough to melt steel. But when he cracked the egg open, it was still raw inside. This material, called Starlite, was a miracle. It could withstand the heat of a nuclear blast. NASA wanted it. Boeing wanted it. It could have changed the world, making fires a thing of the past. But Maurice Ward was paranoid. He refused to let anyone analyze the chemical formula, terrified that big corporations would steal it. He demanded to keep 51% ownership in every deal, and negotiations always fell apart. In 2011, Maurice Ward died. He never wrote the formula down. The secret to the world's greatest heat shield didn't disappear because of a lab accident. It disappeared because of human nature. It reminds us that a discovery is worthless if you are too afraid to share it. Number 5. Vantablack. Imagine staring at an object so dark that it erases your ability to see it. This is Vantablack, a material made of carbon nanotubes that absorbs 99.965% of visible light. It captures photons and traps them, refusing to let them bounce back to your eyes. If you take a piece of aluminum foil, crinkle it up, and spray it with Vantablack, something disturbing happens. You know the wrinkles are there, you can feel them with your fingers, but your eyes see a perfectly flat, black void. All the ridges and valleys vanish. It looks like someone used a computer program to cut a hole in reality. It triggers a primal fear in the brain, like looking into a bottomless pit. It proves that what we call 3D reality is just a trick of light and shadow. Without contrast, even the most complex shapes become nothing. Number 6. The Lycurgus Cup. Let's go back to the British Museum. Sitting on a shelf is a jade green cup from the 4th century Roman Empire. It depicts the death of King Lycurgus. For years, curators thought it was just a nice piece of color glass. But in the 1950s, someone decided to shine a light through the cup from the inside. Suddenly, the green glass turned a glowing blood red. It wasn't magic, it was chemistry. When scientists finally analyzed the glass under a microscope, they found gold and silver ground down to particles just 50 nanometers wide. That is precise nanotechnology. The Romans were manipulating matter on an atomic level 1600 years before we even knew what an atom was. We like to think we are the peak of civilization, but this cup sits there quietly, mocking our arrogance. It makes you wonder, what other sciences did we lose in the burning libraries of the past? Number 7. Superfluid Helium. We all know how liquids work. They flow down. They sit in the bottom of a cup. But if you take liquid helium and cool it down to near absolute zero, the coldest temperature possible, it turns into a superfluid, and it decides to stop following the rules. It loses all friction. Zero viscosity. If you leave it in an open cup, the liquid will literally climb up the inside walls, flow over the edge against gravity, and drip down the outside until the cup is empty. It looks like it's alive, trying to escape its container. This is one of the few times you can see quantum mechanics with your naked eye. Usually, the chaotic laws of quantum physics are hidden in the microscopic world. But here, the monster grows big enough to see. It's a reminder that the laws of physics aren't absolute. They are just suggestions that break down at the extremes. Number 8. The Gömböc. If you want an object to always stand upright like a punching bag or a Weeble-Wobble toy, you put a heavy weight in the bottom. That's cheating. For years, mathematicians wondered, can you make an object that writes itself purely because of its shape? It took 10 years for Hungarian scientists to prove it mathematically and then build it. The result is the Gömböc. It looks like a pristine, curvy stone. It has no hidden weights. Its density is uniform. Yet, no matter how you drop it, the geometry forces it to roll back to its one stable point. It feels like a glitch in gravity. It turns out, nature figured this out millions of years before we did. Some tortoises evolved high-dome shells with this exact geometry so they could roll themselves back over if they fell on their backs. It teaches us a philosophical lesson. True balance doesn't come from carrying a heavy weight. It comes from having the right shape. Number 9. Gabriel's horn. This is an object that exists in the mind, and it broke the brains of 17th century philosophers. Imagine a trumpet that gets narrower and narrower, stretching out forever. The mathematics of this shape are proven, but they create a paradox. Gabriel's horn has a finite volume, but an infinite surface area. That means you could fill the inside of the horn with a single bucket of paint. But if you tried to paint the outside, you would never finish. You could use all the paint in the universe, and you would still have more surface left to cover. It shouldn't make sense. How can a finite amount of paint fill an object that has an infinite surface? It shows that logic and intuition are not always friends. Sometimes the math works, but human reality simply refuses to agree. Number 10. The pitch drop experiment. Finally, we have the ultimate test of patience. In 1927, a professor in Australia put some hot pitch, a tar-like substance, into a funnel and let it cool. At room temperature, pitch feels solid. You can shatter it with a hammer like rock. But the professor knew it was actually a liquid flowing incredibly slowly. He set up the experiment to see how long it would take to drip. He waited and waited. The first drop fell 8 years later. Here is the tragedy. The experiment has been running for nearly 100 years. Only 9 drops have fallen. And for the first 80 years, nobody actually saw a drop fall. Cameras failed, or the scientist was on a coffee break at the exact moment gravity won. It became known as the cursed experiment. It is frustrating, but it reveals a hidden truth. Just because something looks solid and unchanging to you, doesn't mean it isn't moving. Some things in this universe just happen on a timeline that is too slow for a human life to understand.